look like we have a quorum yet. Oh, now we do. Let's just give everyone a minute here to get connected. Okay, I'm going to call the Police Towing Review Board meeting to order. The minutes have been sent out to everyone. Were there any corrections needed in the minutes? None. Okay, not hearing any. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of our March 14th meeting?
So moved.
Okay, I think I heard a second there. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. We have a pretty light agenda today. For old business, we had the report last meeting regarding the 2023 inspections, and it was brought to our attention that there were a couple of tow yards that do not have the tandem wreckers required by the ordinance. One of the questions that we had was when it was effective that the companies were required to have the large tandem wreckers. And we looked that up, and effective January 1st of 22, the legislation required that all companies have those wreckers. Last meeting, we discussed some of the issues with this, how it's not needed on that many calls. I think just a couple a year. We were informed, and we kind of discussed the cost of acquiring one of these wreckers, even used. So we kept this on our agenda to discuss again this meeting. I don't know, does anyone have any comments?
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and make some comments in regards to this.
Sure, thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, because I drafted the legislation. I know originally, if I know you're part of the conversations, if memory serves correctly, that we were going to make it mandatory for each tow yard to have a tandem record, but we changed the language. I have it in front of me. We changed the language so they would be available to provide that service instead of making it mandatory where these companies would have to go out and purchase these large wreckers. Our goal was just to make it the responsibility of each tow company to obviously have these available. If it's borrowing one, renting one, or purchasing one. So I think that was my understanding when we drafted this, but you know, those are my comments in regards to that little section.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone, any other comments?
Yeah, this is Jay with Johnny's Towing. How are you?
Good, how are you? Go ahead.
Good. In reference to this, I'm new to this and I do apologize. I wasn't here for the first meeting. If this is going to be the case in reference to having to borrow or rent one, you know, all the districts in the city, if there's a major accident and that's a major artery of Northeast Ohio is blocked, that all takes time. If the current towers do not have the equipment or can't provide the equipment, why don't we set up something secondary where there's a second heavy duty tow list available to the police department, where that current district tower doesn't get the call where another company does that has the equipment readily available at all times.
Okay, thank you for adding that. Mr. Kramer, do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you. I mean, I'm open to anything. I think the whole, if memory serves me correctly, I mean, obviously this was like almost 2 years ago when I worked on this. I believe there was 3 companies, Greg's, Miller's, and then obviously Johnny's. They all had the tandem wreckers, and just out of respect for their companies and other companies, We just wanted to make sure that these other companies, and maybe Team Towing had one too, where we would just have these available, that each company would understand that, you know, if they have a tow district, they would need these, or, you know, they would be available instead of certain companies having them and some companies don't. I think that's what I'm trying to get out. So, but I'm open to any suggestions or whatever we can do moving forward. But I think that's why we originally changed the wording from mandatory to just being available, because you do have 3 or 4 companies that do have these wreckers in their fleet. And I think we're trying to be fair.
I think to that point, I think the inspections showed that all but 2, I want to say all but 2 do have those wreckers available. I don't recall off the top of my head which 2 companies did not. I think my opinion is that maybe we want to bring those 2 companies in and kind of hold. So our options, I guess, is either, you know, we can find that those 2 companies are not in compliance with the code and proceed that way. We could invite those 2 companies here to our next meeting and kind of hear from them and maybe come up with a creative solution and go from there, or kind of what I'm seeing as possibilities. I don't know. And I personally, I would kind of lean towards inviting them to our next meeting to kind of hear from them, rather than doing it in, you know, a more, I don't want to say adversarial way, but you know, as far as issuing them some sort of violation, maybe they, you know, have been on the lookout for them, but supply shortages have, you know, anything like that. So I think personally, I'd be interested in maybe hearing from them. But I invite any other discussion. Does anyone else have any thoughts here?
Rebecca, I would like to hear, and even if it's not today, so we don't have to take too much time on this, but I would like to hear from some of the companies and their thoughts and opinions in regards to the ones that have the tandem wreckers, what their opinions are. You know, and I don't want to pin companies against each other, but I just kind of want to get the views of those folks too.
Sure. Any of the towing companies on the line, if you want to offer anything. We heard from Johnny's, but it looks like Kinney's is on the line. Carol is on the line.
I can speak to this. Brian from Kenny's.
Hi, go ahead.
Yeah, my resolution for that situation would be the 2 districts that would be Stan's Towing and Bowers Towing that does not have the tandem wreckers that you're talking about. If you could rotate those 2 within the companies that do have them, so then not all the time does one company or another company, they fall back on. Like a lot of times what the Akron police will do, they will call an adjacent company, say it Stan's, they'll call Johnny's or Miller's because they're close to their district. And that is to do a big accident, it takes more than 5 or 10 minutes to get out there, to get a heavy wreck out there, to wreckers to get out there to do the jobs, just so it's done evenly is what my input would be, is just so it's done evenly.
So if I understand, you're suggesting rather than just calling whoever the immediate backup as an adjacent company would be to rotate all of the companies that do have the wreckers.
Exactly. That would be what I would say would be.
Captain McCosey, would that be possible? Or Sergeant Lipa? I don't know if.
I think we could check into it. Frankly, once we're settled on what we want to do, then we can look into making the changes. The biggest problem that we have on those changes is the amount of work that goes into it. We really need to be closer to a final decision on it before you start tampering with it.
Okay, thank you. Just wondering if that's possible. Anyone, other tow companies want to offer anything? Okay, not hearing anything. Carol, were
Yeah,
you wanting to comment? Go ahead.
Can you hear me? I was trying to
Yes.
unmute myself. Okay.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to just to add that we do have a heavy, we have a 25-ton here at Team Towing. And yeah, and I concur with Brian. I think a rotation would be good on the heavies.
Okay, thank you for that.
This is Richard Decatur. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just going from experience of being out on the expressway during these big events, it's pretty dangerous. So the quicker you get that expressway cleared, the safer everyone's going to be. So I understand everybody wanting to rotate the companies in. But I think it's more important that you get whichever company can get there the quickest, or which company is the closest, so that we can get the officers and citizens off the expressway as fast as possible.
Mhm.
And if I can second to that, please. This is Jay Turco with Johnny's Towing again.
Yes.
When a major incident happens in your city, in other cities locally, there's what's called an A list and a B list. An A list is for a major incident, a truck overturns, a jackknife, a truck loses a load of steel at the central interchange, whatever the case may be. And there's a B list. A B list concludes of a truck disabled on the side of the road or an intersection. But when it comes to a major incident, it takes more than one heavy duty 25-ton wrecker to open the roadway in a timely manner. I mean, it's from wreckers or rotators to cranes to skid steers to cleaning up cargo to fuel containment. There's a lot there involved. And it all falls back on clearing your roadways for your citizens, for local traffic, for motoring public, and also for the safety of your officers and your city workers. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for your input. I appreciate that. Well, do we want to? I mean, it is required in the legislation, so they are out of compliance currently. I mean, if we want to go forward and notify the companies that they're not in compliance with the ordinances at the moment, and I mean, we can bring them in and have a hearing on that and give them their opportunity to address it. That's a possibility. That's, I think, what our recourse here would be available to us. So anyone have any thoughts on that? Otherwise, it doesn't sound like it would be to the city's benefit to try to amend the ordinances as they are. I mean, as far as how the police department is calling in, backups for companies that are unavailable is something, I think that's kind of a separate issue that we can discuss.
Rebecca, this is Councilman Kamer.
Yes.
I like your idea about bringing them in just for, conversation, discussion. I mean, I'm trying to go back in time, and I know you were part of this. So is John York, and obviously the tow companies. That's been around for a while. That's been on the tow districts for a while. Had their input, and I mean, safety is very important. Like Lieutenant Decatur mentioned. I think one of the reasons we put this in here is not to penalize the companies, but also make sure that we have professional tow services, companies that have the right equipment. And I'm going to say this, and I mean, we do got some good companies. I think all the companies we have with the districts right now are doing a really good job, unless Captain McCosey says different. But I really enjoy that they're all part of the districts, but we just want to make sure that, you know, we get good companies that are part of the tow district. And I think that's the whole writing of this piece. But yeah, I'm open to bringing them in, having that discussion. I just wanted to weigh in on that.
I appreciate it. And I do recall, and we were trying to give, you know, I think at the time, you know, from the drafting perspective and assisting with this legislation, I believe part of the intent was in setting the date, as of January 1st, 2022. I think the intent was also to try to give them time to acquire necessary equipment and things like that. So it wasn't just going to be sprung on them. So there's that consideration as well, which they've had the time to do now. So I guess at this point, does anyone have any thoughts? Do we want to just invite them to our next meeting, or start the process of as in, you know, framed as a violation of the ordinances?
I think it would be fair to bring them in first, and then once we have a hearing, then it's part of the findings of the hearing. That's where any violations, if that's what we decide to do, then they come out of that.
In the meantime, are we facing any sort of issues that there would be any sort of gaps in service or anything like that, or will the backup system that we have currently in place cover that? While we waited, you know, obviously our board doesn't meet very often, but does the rotation or whatever backup is in place, is that going to cause any issues if, you know, a large accident occurs or anything like that?
Chris, have you heard anything otherwise? I think that the system they have in place will fill the gap. You know, to Lieutenant Decatur's point, when the officers are out there, they'll let you know in a hurry that they need somebody in a hurry. And the dispatchers do a very good job of going down the list and getting the equipment we need out there as quickly as possible. So I think we can manage it for right now. And I think by doing it this way, we not only afford everybody the opportunity to be heard, but we also are kind of providing a process before we take action. And the internal processes that we have will work for right now, and our folks on the people on our end will know that that's in process. So.
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion that we invite Stans and Bowers, if those are the two companies that did not have those tandem wreckers as required, to invite them to our next meeting and give them the opportunity to address some of these concerns. I think unless there's any other objections from the board at that time, we can also, you know, I think that'll give us an idea of how immediate the concerns are and what our timing looks like on resolving this issue. And I think if it's going to be pushed out further than that, maybe at that point we can discuss how to most fairly have the backup coverage for this, as was brought up, you know, weighing against the other concerns that were brought up as far as the timeliness in responding to incidents and removing them from the highway.
Becca?
Okay.
I-
Motion, there's second. Okay, all in
Yeah,
favor?
Rebecca,
Oh, yes, go ahead, sorry.
Point of order. As chair, would it be more appropriate for you to suggest the motion out, and then somebody can move and then second, and then you'd have to write it through, right?
I think I can make motions as well, but do you want to make that motion then, Francie?
So move.
Okay. And second?
And I'll second it.
Okay, great, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thanks, everyone. Our next order of business, have there been any new complaints?
No, no complaints on my end.
Okay. Okay, is there anything else as far as complaints anyone else would want to bring up at this time that anyone else is aware of?
Have we decided yet on the tow fee, that $15? Because we're still charging that fee. And going forward, it's really actually be difficult when the clerk's office moves out of this building and into the building next door.
Yeah,
I would
Mr.
agree.
Kamer, do you want to address that?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Thanks, Ms. Chair. Yeah, so I drafted legislation to get rid of that fee a while back. I do not have it in front of me. I believe it was, you folks might have seen that, the draft. You have? Okay, I've seen some heads shaking. So when I met with the chief of staff to the mayor, Gert Whelms, she wanted to get the tow review board to make a recommendation that you were in favor of that. And then I was going to bring the legislation to city council for hopefully approval. So it's all ready. I think the end goal here is for us as a tow review board to make that recommendation that goes along with that piece of legislation. And then I'll bring it to city council as the sponsor and we can move forward getting rid of that fee.
Didn't we do that at the last meeting?
We did vote to make that recommendation. And I was going to share that recommendation. I did share it with Mr. Kamer first. But I wanted to kind of get a report from him before I sent it to council leadership. But it is ready to go. And so with knowing that the legislation is also ready and available, we can take care of that pretty immediately, I would imagine. So last meeting, we did vote to dispense of that item. Any other complaints that anyone wishes to address? Okay. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone. For the date of our next meeting, I have September 12th at 1:30.
Can I interject you real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
So I wanted to address the issue with Greg's towing. I wanted to do that with the board so that everyone knew at least what our reaction was on this. I did, I think, speak briefly with Councilman Kamer on it. John York was one of the people that were a part of the communication chain when they suddenly closed. And then the next question was, well, what do we do about it? Because that's a tow district and all this is sort of controlled and handled by the council. Our immediate reaction was to put into place a rotation around those districts. There's 2 districts there that we're talking about, both Greg's, which I think is District 3, and Bondurant's, which is District 5A. We had set up rotations, and that's what we're using now, where we have a rotation around those districts. So when the call comes in for a tow in those districts, the computer automates the rotation of the tow companies all around it. That was the only way we could come up with that seemed to be the most appropriate, rather than just assigning it to one company, which would tend to be a problem. So we did set up the rotation. All of our dispatch people were trained on that rotation and how that works in the computer. So that's what we're working on now. To my knowledge, not a lot has changed with Greg's, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But I wanted to throw that out there so that everybody on the board knew what our actions were upon discovering that they were closing. I don't know if that might change in the future, but as it stands right now, the tow districts are clearly defined in the ordinance. We have to use those maps. So the only option we have is to work with that rotation around the map, because if they're closed, they're not responding. And we don't want to have the delay that's involved in it. So we wanted to try to be as fair as possible. So I'll put that out to the group so that they know.
Thank you for bringing that up. I guess, and I know that I've heard a couple different things. Have they ceased operations then, or are they still providing services?
Chris, you can interject if you want, but to my knowledge, they ceased operations on a Friday afternoon. I want to say it was June 2nd, but I could be wrong there. But it was a Friday afternoon. And so we worked out a solution to it with our people that run the CAD. And we've been operating on that solution since. And we have to, because again, the maps are a city council matter. We just have to contend with it. So that's where we're at right now. We were of the understanding that they are open Monday through Friday from 8 to 4 to release vehicles. I don't know that they've done anything else, and we haven't heard from them since then, as far as I know. John, did we hear any more from them since then?
Well, I should say the executor of Greg Prunty's estate sent a letter to council saying that they were going to keep operating the districts. So it was my understanding that when a call came in and dispatch needed a tow in Greg's or Bondurant's district, that dispatch was going to try and call Greg's or Bondurant's like normal. And then if there was no answer, they were going to go to the next company, in your protocol. So I guess I'm curious about, are those calls being made? And if they're being made, is Greg's not answering, or, what kind of response are we getting?
We could clarify that. I can tell you that that notice or that communication never included when they were going to start back up again. So we were never made aware of when they might be actually opening back up and running again. Chris, have you seen anything from Greg's come through?
No, I haven't seen anything recently.
So I don't know, unfortunately, they're not communicating with us. And like I said, the last communication was, well, we'll be open for operations. Well, what type of operations? Because the last I heard on Friday, somebody called and said, yeah, they're open Monday through Friday in the office. Well, that's a different kind of operation than a tow operation. And again, they never said, hey, starting on Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning, we're going to tow cars. So I don't know what the status of them is. No one has notified us, and nobody has given us any indication as to when they would be ready to start towing cars again. So that's where we're at.
Question, Rebecca.
Yes, go ahead.
So, yes, city council did receive the letter from the attorney that's handling the estate. My question is to the law department. Are we able to, or it could be the council's responsibility, are we able to reach back out to that attorney and say, hey, what's the next step? What's going on? This is what we're hearing in regards to the lack of service. I'm asking, Mr. York or yourself, Rebecca, what's the next step?
John, do you have any thoughts on that?
I can, what I would probably do is respond to that attorney's email, and I could point out that when he says they're going to operate the district, I can point him to the ordinance and I can say, these are the requirements. You have to meet these requirements. I think the police department should contact Greg's and Bondurant's directly. Not just on a call, but call them up, say, you know, you're supposedly operating a district, you need to get familiar with the ordinance and know what your responsibilities are. Because if they're really gonna do it, they have to do it the right way, and if they're not gonna do it, then council needs to take action. But I don't think we should sit around for 3 months trying to figure out what's going on. I can follow up with the attorney. APD can follow up with Bondurant's and Greg's directly and go from there.
I agree, John, and I think it would also be equally appropriate, Mr. Kamer, if anybody on council wanted to reach out as well, because, you know, they provided communications to you guys too. So maybe John, if you want to get that started, and then you could kind of report to all of us, you know, what that communication was, just by email. So we're updated, and then APD can adjust their protocols, you know, as needed based on what their response is. I mean, and if there's some serious concerns coming up, if it would be helpful, we can, you know, we can call a meeting before our 3 months, or before our typical 3 months, and we can kind of discuss it further if we feel, you know, that they're either not being responsive or, you know, complaints are arising, just to try to get it resolved as expeditiously as possible.
I appreciate that. Yeah, my thing is I have the email in front of me, and I'm glad John's going to start the conversation with the attorney. My biggest question mark would be responding to a attorney that's handling the estate that's in Summit County probate as elected official. So that's why I'm relying on the law department for their advice on that one.
Understood. I think, does that sound like a reasonable approach to it for everybody?
You want me to reach out to Greg's and ask them if they are still in full
Yes.
operation? And if so, then we would start contacting them first. And if we're having issues with them responding, then we move on to our next tow district.
Yes,
Okay, I'll reach out today after this meeting and get the ball rolling to see if they are in full operation for towing.
And I'll take care of the notice to the attorney this afternoon as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and after you guys have those communications, if you just want to keep, you know, like I said, keep the board members in the loop. That way we'll know if we need to meet again and go forward from there. Otherwise, I think that we should just keep that item on our agenda, and we can at least touch base again about it at our next meeting, and hopefully get an update that everything is running smoothly, but we'll see. So we'll keep that item on our agenda. Is there anything else coming before the board? Not seeing or hearing any. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor? Signify by saying
Aye.
aye. All right, thanks. I'll see you in September.
Have a great day, everyone.